So if the Texans are sitting here saying no protection on picks, and every team's saying we want protection on picks, is there any clarity maybe behind the scenes where the Dolphins, knowing this sort of stuff could get out, and they don't mind having a tire kick on Deshaun Watson, with Tua getting set to start the season, and everybody else with Carolina and Sam Darnold, and Philadelphia having with Jalen Hurts, that they don't mind potentially, obviously they do deep down, but knowing that it's worth taking the risk. Is there any clarity on Deshaun Watson's criminal, civil liability investigation situation at all that we might not know, that you're hearing about, Charles?
Well, in terms of the one bit of clarity I can say is that I do think, and Deshaun Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, has said this publicly a few times, that the NFL's investigation is sort of in limbo, because there's an element of when the NFL, when Lisa Friel and the NFL, they do these investigations, there's always sort of what I refer to as a grand finale interview. And the way that usually happens is they collect every bit of evidence or, interviews, whatever information they think is germane to their investigation. And then at the end, they come in and they do the final sort of pivotal interview with the player. And that has not happened with Deshaun Watson. And from what Rusty Hardin has indicated at least twice publicly, the reason why the NFL has not done that, and what they have indicated to him, is that they don't want to step on the fact that there's parallel criminal investigations that are going on. They don't want to step into someone else's world and somehow taint, by sharing information or asking certain questions, the investigation that's going on criminally. So they're in limbo. They're essentially waiting for those to wrap up. The grand jury investigation, the subpoenas have gone out. It's in a process of gathering information. We don't know whether or not, because of every grand jury rotates in Texas every 90 days. So we're not told sort of where the current grand jury is in terms of that 90 days. If they're on the 85th day,
right,
chances are information is not going to be presented to this grand jury on the 85th day. They'll wait until the next rotation starts. So he may not even really, in terms of the investigation, what a grand jury hears about this, it might not even start for a period of 2 days, 2 weeks, a month and a half. I mean, there's no clarity, and they don't tell. It's all sealed. None of this is public. And to me, the FBI, both lawyers involved, said we don't know what the FBI is doing. They've asked questions. They're not telling us anything. They're not tipping us off to anything other than the questions they ask. We have no clue the depth of it, how long it will take, or if there's ever anything that's going to happen. I think Rusty Hardin probably put it best when at one point he said, it could just end. We don't even know. They never tell us. They're not going to tip us off to it. So, and I think the Houston Police Department is really that the alleged victims who have spoken to the Houston Police Department, that's all going to be tied into the Harris County Prosecutor's Office. So from a criminal aspect of it, it could be months and months, and again, the fact that the NFL did not choose to put him on the exempt list,
right,
is a fairly clear indication that the NFL says what we have now in front of us, it does not rise to the level of us making that decision, and that's where we stand.
So then he's going to be on the 53-man, and what, like the third quarterback inactive, not dressed, just tell him to go home, pay him until. That's how Deshaun Watson's 2021 season is going to be played out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we get, what we've seen in the preseason, which is he's going to be a member of the team. He's on the roster, but he's separate from the roster. He's not going to be someone who's going to be active on game days. And, they'll carry him. Now here's something that's important. You could drum up, say, an injury. He's had, trainers work on him. He sat out practice a few times. What he has said is a lower body injury. The Texans, to be frank here, don't fully believe that's true. They feel like he's sort of said some of these things to keep himself off the field and away from the cameras. But if you leaned into that, you could say, we're putting him on injured reserve. He's got a calf pull. He's got whatever soft tissue injury. So he goes on injured reserve 3 weeks into being on injured reserve. Then basically you can resume the potential of trading him. Keeping him on the 53-man roster past 4:00 today means you continue to have the avenue to trade him at any moment, any minute between now and, the trade deadline. So keeping him on the 53-man roster there's a tactical element that makes sense here if there is a chance he could be traded 3 days from now, 2 weeks from now, but doing the injured reserve route, that's going to put him, in limbo for at least a 3-week period where you're not going to be able to deal him.
All right, and then I keep having questions. This will be my last one because I was going to ask you about other stuff in the NFL. So what was the Dolphins' plan? Get him in, have protection in terms of the draft choices, and then start him like week 1. Show up in New England with all these questions and stick him out there in front of the media and the possibility of everything that's going on with him dropping in their lap in the middle of the season. It's Jacoby Brissett time, like literally, and then they'll just weather all those storms. And then eventually, in 2022, 2023, no one will remember how crazy 2021 was, and they've got Deshaun Watson at a highly affordable rate. That's literally what their plan was? That's it?
Well, the answer, there's actually the question, at least in the immediacy, I think the questions even go deeper than that, because remember, this is a guy who's not practiced, at least, not in the typical sense of how a quarterback practices in the preseason. So it's not like he's been out there throwing balls. He hasn't played in preseason games. He hasn't taken part in joint practices. So there's the fitness level. Like, is he ready? Would he even be ready to step out and start throwing a ball immediately? If he wasn't, and Tua is still on your roster, that means Tua starts the season as a starter, and then all of a sudden you switch to Deshaun Watson when he's ready.
Wow.
Doesn't seem, that to me seems, trust me, the timing of this, I get it. People, it's not like I ignore the question. People have great questions. It's not like I don't have those questions too.
Right. I know.
And then, but again, we don't know. I don't know personally what work behind the scenes the Dolphins have done in terms of speaking to the league office, speaking to Roger Goodell, doing their own work on what, the allegations are, how this could run its course criminally, and then also the league investigation. And, every general manager who I spoke to who's involved in this has spoken to Rusty Hardin. And I can tell you this, Rusty Hardin, that's Deshaun Watson's attorney, has maintained from day one with unequivocally, the guy's innocent. I'm going to show you he's innocent. We're going to go to court and show you he's innocent. They want to settle, and we are demanding that if we do settle, there's no NDA. So we can talk about how all this went, the money, everything. We want everything transparent. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, so if he's saying that and the Dolphins are doing their own brand of work, how do we know what the Dolphins have found? What if Brian Flores says, I know the kid. I know the kid's background. We've done work on him, all these different things. Maybe I believe that he hasn't had his day to talk about what's happened, the allegations, and let this whole thing unfold. Maybe there's a feeling internally there that people could feel differently about this 6 months from now than they do today, once things start to sort of unfold either in front of a grand. Here, this could change dramatically. People really need to understand this. If this goes before a grand jury, okay? Mm-hmm. If a grand jury sits here and says, we're not indicting, we're going to do what's called a no bill, which is we don't have any charges for him to plead to. To be indicted would mean he instantly would have to plead to whatever charges the grand jury comes up with. If the grand jury comes back and says, we have a no bill determination, that means we have nothing for you to plead to. There are no charges here that we are advancing for you to plead to. At that point, that changes significantly because now you have a grand jury that has sat, weighed the evidence, heard, if they chose to, heard interviews from the alleged victims in this situation and said, we got nothing for you. That is a significant, it's a titanic moment in the legal process, and I think it would very much change the narrative for NFL teams when it comes to the reticence to take a look at him in terms of a trade.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.